My name is Carissa, and at 67, I thought I had seen it all in my nursing career. My son Jason means everything to me, which is why I tried so hard with his wife Amanda, despite her coldness. That Tuesday morning when she accidentally sent his lunch to my house seemed insignificant until my coworker Margaret examined it. Her face drained of color. "Take your son to the hospital immediately," she whispered. "Why?" I asked. She looked at me with terror in her eyes. "I can't explain it here. Do it now or your son will die." If you're new here, please hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This story might save someone you love. I retired from nursing 10 years ago, after 40 years of service at Michigan General Hospital. My husband Robert passed away that same year from a sudden heart attack, leaving me to navigate widowhood alone. I found purpose again by volunteering 3 days a week at the Lakeside Senior Center, helping other seniors with activities and basic health monitoring. The routine gave structure to my days and allowed me to continue using my nursing skills to help others. Jason was always a bright child, curious about everything, and particularly drawn to science. I still remember him at 8 years old conducting little experiments in our kitchen, measuring how different liquids mixed together, or testing which household items would float. His father encouraged this scientific exploration, buying him chemistry sets for birthdays, and taking him to science museums on weekends. Jason excelled in school, especially in chemistry and biology, making his path to becoming a high school chemistry teacher almost inevitable. After graduating with honors from the University of Michigan with a degree in chemistry education, Jason secured a position at Franklin High School, where he has been teaching for the past 12 years. His students adore him for his interactive teaching style and genuine passion for making science accessible. The school has awarded him Teacher of the Year twice, recognitions that make my heart swell with pride whenever I think about them. Jason met Amanda during their final year of university. He was completing his education degree while she was finishing her psychology studies. They met at a campus coffee shop where she supposedly spilled coffee on his textbook accidentally. Looking back, I wonder if even that was calculated. Jason was immediately taken by her confidence and intelligence. He brought her to Sunday dinner just 3 weeks after they started dating. I noticed little warning signs almost immediately, though I kept them to myself. Amanda would subtly correct Jason in conversation, completing his sentences or clarifying points he was making, as though he couldn't express himself properly. She had a way of touching his arm when doing this, that appeared affectionate, but seemed controlling to my experienced eyes. When Jason would share an achievement or exciting news, Amanda would often redirect the conversation to herself within minutes. Amanda came from a wealthy family in Grosse Pointe. Her father owned several car dealerships across the state, and her mother was a prominent socialite who chaired numerous charity committees. From what Jason told me, Amanda's childhood was filled with rigid expectations and conditional approval. She attended private schools and was expected to maintain perfect grades, perfect appearance, and perfect behavior. Her parents controlled nearly every aspect of her life, from the clothes she wore to the friends she was allowed to have. Perhaps this explained some of her behavior, but it never excused it in my mind. With her psychology degree, Amanda secured a position at a corporate consulting firm specializing in employee behavioral assessment. She often spoke about understanding human motivation and behavioral patterns in a way that seemed less about helping people and more about learning to manipulate them. Their wedding 4 years ago was an elaborate affair, mostly orchestrated by Amanda's parents, and reflecting little of Jason's simpler tastes. I observed Amanda's mother micromanaging every detail, and Amanda mimicking this controlling behavior with the wedding planners and vendors. During the reception, I overheard Amanda snapping at Jason for speaking too long with one of his college friends. She masked it quickly with a laugh when she noticed me nearby, but the sharpness in her voice was unmistakable. Despite these concerns, I tried to be the best mother-in-law possible. I remembered the difficulties I had with Robert's mother, and promised myself I wouldn't repeat those patterns. I brought homemade meals when they first moved into their house, offered help without being intrusive, and always made sure to compliment Amanda sincerely whenever possible. Yet she maintained a polite but unmistakable distance, accepting my gestures with practiced grace, but never reciprocating or allowing true warmth to develop between us. Jason and Amanda purchased a beautiful colonial-style home in Fairview Heights, a suburban neighborhood about 20 minutes from my condominium. Their house was too large for just the two of them, in my opinion, but Amanda insisted they needed the space for entertaining clients and colleagues. I visited about twice a month for dinner, and occasionally Jason would stop by my place after school if he was in the area. Amanda rarely accompanied him on these impromptu visits. Over the past 6 months, I had noticed subtle changes in Jason. He had always been lean but athletic, maintaining the same weight since college through regular running and weekend basketball games with friends. Lately, though, he had lost at least 15 pounds from his already trim frame. His face appeared gaunt, and the vibrant energy that had always characterized him seemed diminished. He began canceling our regular lunch dates, citing increased workload or fatigue. When we did meet, he would pick at his food and sometimes excused himself to use the bathroom multiple times. I noticed his hands occasionally trembled slightly when reaching for his water glass. When I expressed concern, he brushed it off as stress from a new curriculum he was implementing or blamed it on stomach bugs circulating at school. As a former nurse, these symptoms alarmed me, but as a mother, I was caught in that difficult space of wanting to help without overstepping. Jason had always been independent, and I respected his adulthood and marriage despite my reservations about Amanda. I suggested he see a doctor for a checkup, which he promised to do, but never confirmed actually doing. The last time I saw Jason before the incident, about 2 weeks prior, he had mentioned feeling dizzy occasionally and having unexplained nausea in the mornings. Again, he attributed it to stress and possibly a minor stomach virus. When I asked if Amanda was taking good care of him, a shadow seemed to cross his face before he quickly assured me she was very attentive, making him special teas and preparing bland foods that would be gentle on his stomach. In retrospect, I should have recognized these as classic symptoms of poisoning, especially given my medical background. But the mind has a way of rejecting the unthinkable, particularly when it involves those we love most. I never imagined that the woman my son had chosen as his life partner could be systematically destroying his health. How could anyone suspect such a horrific betrayal without concrete evidence? Tuesday mornings always followed the same routine for me. I would wake up at 6:30, enjoy a cup of coffee on my small balcony overlooking the community garden, then prepare for my volunteer shift at Lakeside Senior Center. That particular Tuesday in April seemed no different, as I performed my morning rituals unaware that by afternoon my son's life and my own would be irrevocably changed. I had just finished getting dressed in comfortable slacks and a light sweater when my phone chimed with a text message. It was from Amanda, which was unusual in itself. She rarely contacted me directly, preferring to communicate through Jason if necessary. The message read, "So sorry for the mix-up. Accidentally sent Jason's lunch to your house this morning with the delivery service. The driver must have used a saved address. Can you set it outside your door? I'll send someone to pick it up." I found this odd for several reasons. First, they lived only 20 minutes away, so using a delivery service to transport a simple lunch seemed excessive. Second, Amanda had never sent anything to my house through delivery before, so why would my address be saved in their account? And finally, there was an urgency in her follow-up texts that seemed disproportionate to the situation. When I opened my front door, I found a plain black insulated lunch bag sitting on the welcome mat. It looked ordinary enough, with no distinctive features. I picked it up and texted Amanda back. "I've got it. I'm heading to the senior center now, but will be home around 4. I can drop it by your house afterward." Her response came immediately. "No, Jason needs it for lunch today. I'll send someone to the center to get it from you." This seemed like an overreaction for what was surely just a sandwich and some snacks. I responded, "Don't trouble anyone. I'll drop it at his school on my way to the center. It's not far off my route." There was a noticeable delay before her next message. "Don't do that. Just take it with you. I'll figure something out." Something about the exchange left me uneasy, but I dismissed the feeling as my general wariness about Amanda. I placed the lunch bag in my tote along with my own lunch and headed out to my car. The drive to Lakeside Senior Center took about 15 minutes through tree-lined streets just beginning to bloom with spring. The center was housed in a renovated Victorian mansion donated to the city decades ago by a wealthy family. Its spacious rooms had been converted into activity areas, a dining hall, health screening rooms, and comfortable lounges. My volunteer duties varied day to day, from helping with exercise classes to assisting with blood pressure screenings, or simply providing companionship to those with few visitors. That morning, I was assigned to help organize a craft activity for a group of residents in the sunroom. As I set up supplies for the watercolor painting session, my friend and fellow volunteer Margaret arrived. Margaret had been a pharmacist for over 30 years before retiring, and her knowledge of medications and their effects often complemented my nursing background when residents had questions about their prescriptions. At 69, Margaret maintained the sharp mind and observant nature that had served her well professionally. Her silver hair was always neatly styled, and she dressed with a crisp elegance that I admired. We had become close friends over the 3 years. We'd volunteered together, often sharing lunch and confiding in each other about family matters and concerns. The morning passed quickly as we guided residents through their painting projects, offering encouragement and assistance where needed. One elderly gentleman, Mr. Sullivan, painted a remarkably detailed landscape from memory of his childhood farm in Iowa. Another resident, Mrs. Abernathy, who struggled with advancing dementia, seemed briefly more lucid as she worked on her painting of bright yellow sunflowers. By noon, we had cleaned up the art supplies and helped escort residents to the dining hall for lunch. Volunteers typically ate together in a small break room adjacent to the kitchen. I retrieved Jason's lunch along with my own from the staff refrigerator where Id stored them earlier. 4 other volunteers joined Margaret and me at the table, chatting about an upcoming fundraiser for the center. I barely participated in the conversation, my mind preoccupied with worry about Jason and his declining health. I absent-mindedly placed both lunch bags on the table, opening mine, while leaving Jason's closed beside it. Diane, another volunteer, was discussing her grandson's college applications when Margaret suddenly interrupted, staring at Jason's lunch bag. "Carissa, is that Jason's lunch?" she asked, her voice strangely tense. I looked up, surprised by her tone. "Yes, Amanda accidentally sent it to my house this morning. I'm going to drop it off at his school after my shift." Margaret reached for the bag. "May I see it?" Her request seemed odd, but I nodded. "Why?" She didn't answer immediately, unzipping the bag and peering inside without removing anything. I watched as the color drained from her face, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. "What's wrong?" I asked, concern rising in my chest. The other volunteers had fallen silent, watching our exchange with confused interest. Margaret zipped the bag closed and stood abruptly. "Carissa, we need to talk privately. Now." Her tone brooked no argument. I excused myself from the table and followed her into the empty health screening room down the hall. Margaret closed the door behind us and turned to me with an expression I had never seen on her normally composed face. It was raw fear. "You need to take your son to the hospital immediately," she whispered urgently. My heart began pounding. "Why? What's wrong with the lunch?" Margaret shook her head, her hands trembling slightly. "I can't fully explain it here, and I don't want to jump to conclusions without proper testing. But based on what I can see, there's something very wrong with that food. Do it now, Carissa, or your son will die." The word "die" struck me like a physical blow. Margaret wasn't prone to exaggeration or drama. If she was this alarmed, there must be a serious reason. "Margaret, please, you have to tell me what you're thinking," I pleaded. She gripped my shoulders, her eyes intense. "Trust me on this. Get Jason to the emergency room, have them test him for poisoning, and have them examine this food. Don't call ahead, don't let anyone know you're coming, and whatever you do, don't let his wife know until he's safe." The implications of her words hung in the air between us, too terrible to fully comprehend. I felt the room spin slightly as the unthinkable possibility took root in my mind. My hands shook as Margaret guided me back to the screening room chair. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of her suspicion hanging heavy between us. Finally, I found my voice. "We need to look at the food more carefully," I said, my nurse training kicking in despite my emotional turmoil. Margaret nodded grimly and placed the lunch bag on the examination table. She pulled latex gloves from a nearby box and handed me a pair, before donning her own. With deliberate care, she unzipped the bag fully and began removing its contents. The lunch appeared normal at first glance: a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, an apple in a small plastic container, homemade cookies in another container, and a thermos, presumably filled with coffee or tea. Margaret examined the sandwich, first carefully unwrapping it. It looked like an ordinary turkey sandwich with lettuce and tomato, but as she gently lifted the bread, she pointed to barely perceptible specks of white powder clinging to the mayonnaise. "Do you see this?" she asked quietly. "It's not consistent with normal ingredients." She moved to the apple, next rotating the container to examine it from all angles before opening it. The apple had been sliced, the pieces looking slightly discolored around the edges. "These slices have been treated with something," she observed. "See how there's a subtle crystalline residue where the knife cut through." The cookies seemed innocent enough, typical chocolate chip, but when Margaret broke one in half, she pointed to tiny white particles mixed into the dough that didn't look like flour or sugar crystals. Last, she opened the thermos and sniffed the contents, then quickly recoiled. "There's definitely something added to this tea," she said, her pharmacist training evident in her methodical assessment. "It has an almond-like smell that shouldn't be there unless it's almond tea, which I doubt." She recapped the thermos and looked at me gravely. "Carissa, I believe someone has been adding toxic substances to this food. The patterns I'm seeing are consistent with certain poisons that can cause gradual organ damage when administered over time." My mind reeled, struggling to process what she was suggesting. "You think Amanda is poisoning my son?" It seemed incomprehensible, something from a thriller movie, not real life. "I can't say with absolute certainty without laboratory testing," Margaret replied carefully. "But I've worked with medications and compounds for decades. These are not normal food additives, Carissa. And you yourself have mentioned Jason's declining health. The symptoms you've described, weakness, weight loss, tremors, are consistent with chronic poisoning." I sank deeper into the chair, memories flooding back of Jason, mentioning that Amanda had been preparing special meals for him when he wasn't feeling well. The tease she'd been brewing for his stomach issues. How his symptoms often seemed worse after weekends at home, and slightly improved by Fridays after eating cafeteria food all week. "We need to call Jason," I said, reaching for my phone with trembling fingers. I dialed his number, but the call went straight to voicemail. He would be teaching now, his phone silenced during class. I tried the school office next. "Franklin, hi. How may I direct your call?" came the receptionist's voice. "This is Carissa Harmon, Jason Harmon's mother," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I need to speak with my son immediately. It's a family emergency." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harmon, but Mr. Harmon is teaching AP chemistry right now. I can take a message or have him call you during his planning period at 1:30. "Please, I need to speak with him now. It's life or death," I insisted, no longer caring how dramatic I sounded. There was a pause before the receptionist replied, "I'll have someone cover his class and send him to the phone. Please hold." The minutes waiting felt like hours. When Jason finally came to the phone, his voice sounded weaker than I'd realized. "Mom, what's going on? Are you okay?" "Jason, I need you to listen carefully," I said. "Don't go back to class. Tell them you're not feeling well and need to leave. I'm coming to pick you up right now." "What? Why, I've got classes all afternoon." "Just trust me, please. It's important. Meet me at the front entrance in 20 minutes. And Jason, don't tell anyone where you're going, not even Amanda. I'll explain everything when I see you." Before he could argue further, I ended the call and turned to Margaret. "I'm going to get him now and take him straight to the hospital." Margaret nodded carefully, repacking the lunch items. "Take this with you for testing," she instructed. "And Carissa, be careful. If I'm right about this, your daughter-in-law is extremely dangerous." The gravity of her warning sent a chill through me. I thanked her for her help and promised to update her, then rushed to my car with the lunch bag sealed in a larger plastic bag Margaret had provided. The drive to Franklin High School was a blur of anxiety and fragmented memories. Images of Jason, as a small boy, with skinned knees, coming to me for comfort. Jason in his cap and gown at graduation, beaming with pride. Jason introducing Amanda to me for the first time, his eyes full of love while hers calculated something I couldn't decipher. I parked haphazardly near the school entrance, barely remembering to turn off the engine before rushing inside. Jason was waiting in the lobby, leaning against the wall for support. The sight of him under the harsh fluorescent lights shocked me. His complexion was ashen with dark circles under his eyes. His clothes hung loosely on his frame. How had I not noticed how severe his decline had become? "Mom, what is this about?" he asked as I approached. "You sounded panicked on the phone." I took his arm, feeling how thin it had become, and guided him toward the exit. "Not here. I'll explain in the car." He was too weak to put up much resistance, which frightened me even more. The Jason I'd raised was strong-willed and energetic. This compliant, exhausted man was a shadow of my son. Once in the car, I turned to face him. "Jason, I'm taking you to the emergency room. I believe you're being poisoned." His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "What? That's crazy. I just have some kind of stomach bug that won't go away." I showed him the lunch bag. "This was sent to my house this morning. My friend Margaret is a former pharmacist, and she identified toxic substances in the food. Your symptoms, weight loss, weakness, tremors, nausea, they're all consistent with poisoning." Jason shook his head. "That's impossible. Who's supposed to be poisoning me?" I hesitated, then spoke the words that would change everything. "I think it's Amanda." The 20-minute drive to Michigan Memorial Hospital was filled with Jason's denials and my gentle but firm insistence. He veered between outright dismissal of my concerns and momentary flashes of doubt that revealed his own unacknowledged suspicions. "You don't understand Amanda, like I do, Mom," he argued weakly as we pulled into the emergency room parking lot. "She takes care of me. When I'm not feeling well, she's the one making special meals, brewing healing teas. Why would she do that if she was trying to hurt me?" I parked as close to the entrance as possible, noting how Jason had to pause and steady himself against the car after standing. "Consider this," I said gently. "Have you noticed feeling worse after consuming those special meals and teas?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face before he shook it away. "That's just coincidence. I'm not letting you drag Amanda into some crazy accusation without evidence." "That's exactly why we're here," I replied. "To get evidence one way or another. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize to both of you. But Jason, please, just let the doctors examine you and test the food." His resistance weakened as another wave of dizziness hit him, forcing him to grab my arm for support. "Fine," he conceded. "But only to prove there's nothing to worry about." The emergency room was mercifully not too crowded that afternoon. I approached the triage nurse, my former professional experience, helping me communicate the situation effectively. "My son needs immediate attention," I stated firmly. "He's showing symptoms consistent with poisoning over an extended period. We have food samples that need testing as well." The nurse, a young woman with efficient movements, assessed Jason quickly, noting his pallor, elevated heart rate, and apparent weight loss. She disappeared briefly to consult with a doctor, then returned to escort us directly to a treatment room, bypassing the usual wait. Dr. Patel, a slender man with kind eyes and a confident demeanor, joined us minutes later. He listened carefully as I explained my suspicions and showed him the lunch bag. "These are serious allegations, Mrs. Harmon," he said gravely. "But given your son's symptoms, we're going to run a comprehensive toxicology panel and examine these food items. In the meantime, we're going to start IV fluids and do a complete workup." The next few hours were a flurry of medical activity. Jason had blood-drawn urine samples collected and a series of imaging tests. I stayed by his side throughout, watching as nurses inserted an IV line and attached monitoring equipment. He looked both embarrassed by my concern and secretly relieved at being taken seriously by the medical staff. While a lab technician took the food samples for analysis, Dr. Patel returned to discuss Jason's initial test results. "Your son is showing elevated liver enzymes and concerning kidney function markers," he informed me, while Jason dozed lightly on the examination bed. "There's evidence of systemic inflammation and trace elements in his blood that shouldn't be there. We're still identifying exactly what substances we're dealing with, but I can tell you with certainty that he's been exposed to toxic compounds." The confirmation sent a wave of dread through me, even though Id suspected it. And the food? I asked quietly. The preliminary tests show contamination, Dr. Patel confirmed. We've identified traces of several concerning substances, including what appears to be small amounts of arsenic and potentially thallium. We're doing more comprehensive testing now, but I can tell you that these are not substances that would naturally occur in food. I closed my eyes, briefly absorbing the horror of what was being confirmed. My daughter-in-law had been systematically poisoning my son. The hospital room suddenly felt cold despite the warm April afternoon outside the window. "We need to contact the police," Dr. Patel said gently. "This is a criminal matter now." I nodded, numb with shock despite having suspected the truth. While a nurse helped me contact the local police department, I struggled with how to tell Jason. He was still defending Amanda even as his body was revealing the evidence of her betrayal. 2 officers arrived within the hour. Detective Morales, a middle-aged woman with shrewd eyes, and her younger partner, Officer Torres, listened carefully as I explained the situation. They took notes, examined the preliminary lab reports Dr. Patel provided, and asked detailed questions about Amanda and her behavior. "Has your daughter-in-law shown any unusual interest in your son's health insurance or finances?" Detective Morales asked. The question startled me. I had been so focused on the immediate medical crisis that I hadn't considered motive. "Jason has a substantial life insurance policy through his teaching position," I said slowly, remembering a conversation from months ago. "And we come from a family with some inheritance money. My late husband left everything to Jason to be received when he turns 40 or..." The words stuck in my throat. "Or in the event of your son's death," Detective Morales finished for me. "How long until he turns 40? 5 years, I whispered. "He's 35 now." Officer Torres was typing notes into a tablet. "And who suggested the life insurance policy?" I thought back, trying to recall. Jason mentioned increasing his coverage after they got married. I think Amanda said it was the responsible thing to do since they had a mortgage." The detectives exchanged glances, and I could see they were mentally adding this to a growing list of red flags. Jason began to stir on the bed, and Detective Morales lowered her voice. "We need to speak with your son alone, Mrs. Harmon. It's standard procedure. Would you mind stepping out briefly?" I reluctantly moved to the hallway, watching through the small window as Jason became fully alert and realized police were in his room. His expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness as they began questioning him. I could see him shaking his head repeatedly, then becoming more agitated as they presumably shared the preliminary test results. After about 20 minutes, Dr. Patel approached me in the hallway, holding a tablet with lab results. "Mrs. Harmon, we've completed the more comprehensive testing of both your son's blood and the food samples," he said gravely. "The results are conclusive. We've found significant levels of arsenic thallium and traces of digitalis, a compound derived from foxglove plants. All 3 are highly toxic, especially with sustained exposure. The food in the lunch container shows matching toxic profiles, particularly concentrated in the tea and the sandwich spread." My nursing background helped me understand the implications immediately. Those compounds would cause the exact symptoms Jason had been experiencing. Gradual poisoning with these substances would have eventually led to complete organ failure and death, a death that might have been attributed to a mysterious illness rather than murder. Before I could respond, a commotion from Jason's room drew our attention. He was sitting upright in bed, face flushed with emotion, his voice raised enough to be heard through the door. "This is insane," he shouted. "Amanda would never do this. Never. You're all conspiring against her because Mom never liked her. I'm checking myself out of here." Detective Morales stepped into the hallway, motioning for Dr. Patel to join her for a private conversation. Left alone, I watched through the window as Officer Torres attempted to calm my son. A moment later, Detective Morales returned to me. "Mrs. Harmon, we've contacted the prosecutor's office. They're preparing a warrant to search your son and daughter-in-law's home. Given the evidence already collected, they believe there's sufficient cause." "What about Amanda?" I asked. "Has anyone contacted her?" "Not yet," the detective replied. "We don't want to alert her until we have the warrant in hand. However, it's likely she already knows something is wrong since your son hasn't returned home or contacted her." As if summoned by our conversation, a hospital staff member approached. "There's a woman at the nurse's station asking for Jason Harmon. Says she's his wife." My blood ran cold. Detective Morales straightened her jacket. "Let's go meet her, shall we?" Amanda stood at the nurse's station, the picture of concerned, wifely devotion. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, her makeup subtle but flawless. She wore a pale blue sweater that emphasized her wide, innocent-looking eyes. Anyone passing by would see only a worried young woman seeking her husband. But I saw something else entirely. The slight tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted quickly around assessing exits and witnesses, the calculated nature of her concerned expression. It was like seeing her clearly for the first time, the mask momentarily transparent to reveal the predator beneath. "Jason," she called out when she spotted me, approaching with Detective Morales. Her voice trembled perfectly. "I was so worried when the school called and said Head gone home sick, Hez not answering his phone." She turned those wide eyes to me. "Carissa, what's happening? Is he okay?" Before I could respond, Detective Morales stepped forward. "Mrs. Harmon, Detective Morales with the Lakeside Police Department. Your husband is being treated for a serious condition. Would you mind coming with us to discuss the situation privately?" Police Amanda's hand fluttered to her throat, a gesture that once might have seemed like natural distress, but now struck me as rehearsed. "Is Jason hurt? Was there an accident?" "Please follow us," Detective Morales repeated, firmly guiding Amanda toward a small consultation room off the main corridor. I followed behind, watching Amanda's perfectly straight posture, the controlled movements of someone working hard to appear normal. Inside the consultation room, Amanda took a seat facing the door, another detail that registered as significant. Detective Morales sat across from her while I stood near the window, unable to bring myself to sit near the woman who had been slowly killing my son. Mrs. Harmon, Detective Morales began using the formal address that could apply to either of us. "Your husband has been admitted with symptoms consistent with poisoning. His condition is serious, but stable." Amanda's eyes widened, her hands clasping dramatically in her lap. "Poisoning? How is that possible?" "We were hoping you might help us understand that," Detective Morales replied evenly. "Toxic substances were found in his system and in the lunch that was delivered to his mother's house this morning." For just a fraction of a second, Amanda's composure slipped. A flash of calculation crossed her features before the mask of concern returned. "But that makes no sense," she protested. "I made that lunch myself this morning. It was just a turkey sandwich, some apple slices and cookies I baked yesterday." The detective nodded, making notes. "And the tea in the thermos?" "Just green tea with honey," Amanda replied smoothly. "Jason has been having stomach problems. The tea helps settle it." "Has he seen a doctor about these problems?" Detective Morales asked. Amanda shifted slightly in her seat. "He didn't think it was necessary. Men, you know." She attempted a conspiratorial smile that neither of us returned. "I've been taking care of him at home. I'm very well read on holistic remedies." I couldn't contain myself any longer. "The hospital found arsenic, thallium, and digitalis in his system and in the food you prepared, Amanda. The same poisons that have been making him sick for months." Her eyes narrowed briefly before widening in manufactured shock. "That's ridiculous. Why would I poison my own husband? I love Jason." Detective Morales held up a hand to pause the exchange. "Mrs. Harmon, Amanda, I should inform you that the police department is currently executing a search warrant at your residence. We have reason to believe evidence related to your husband's poisoning may be found there." I sank deeper into the chair, memories flooding back of Jason, mentioning that Amanda had been preparing special meals for him when he wasn't feeling well. The teas she'd been brewing for his stomach issues. How his symptoms often seemed worse after weekends at home and slightly improved by Fridays after eating cafeteria food all week. "Not with a warrant," Detective Morales corrected calmly. "I'd also like to inform you that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." As the detective continued reciting Miranda rights, Amanda's demeanor transformed. The pretense of concern evaporated, replaced by cold calculation. When Detective Morales finished, Amanda sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on a point on the wall. "I want to see Jason," she stated flatly. "I'm afraid that's not possible right now," Detective Morales replied. "He's still undergoing treatment, and he's been advised not to have visitors while the investigation proceeds." Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then I want my attorney. I'm not saying anything else without legal representation." As if on cue, Detective Morales' phone rang. She excused herself to answer it, stepping just outside the door while Officer Torres entered to monitor Amanda. The consultation room fell into tense silence, with Amanda staring straight ahead and me watching her from across the room, still struggling to reconcile this cold woman with the person my son had chosen to marry. A few minutes later, Detective Morales returned her expression grave but satisfied. She addressed Amanda directly. "We just received an update from the officers at your residence. They found a locked cabinet in your home office, containing several vials of chemicals, including arsenic compounds and plant extracts, consistent with digitalis. They also discovered a hidden compartment in your desk drawer containing a notebook detailing administration schedules and dosages, along with research on poisoning symptoms and treatments." Amanda's face remained impassive, but I could see her hands tighten in her lap until the knuckles whitened. Additionally, Detective Morales continued, "They found financial documents relating to your husband's life insurance policy and what appears to be draft correspondence with real estate agents about selling your home should your husband pass away. Based on this evidence, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder." Officer Torres moved forward with handcuffs as Detective Morales continued reading Amanda's rights again. I watched a surreal feeling washing over me, as the woman who had shared Sunday dinners at my table, who had stood beside my son at the altar, was handcuffed and prepared for transport to the police station. As they led her toward the door, Amanda suddenly stopped and turned to look at me. Her expression had transformed completely, the mask of normalcy entirely gone. What stared back at me wasn't human warmth or even anger, but a cold, empty calculation that sent chills down my spine. "He was never going to amount to anything more than a high school teacher," she said, her voice stripped of its usual affected sweetness. "All that potential, all that family money wasted on science projects and classroom demonstrations for ungrateful teenagers. I could have done something with it, something worthwhile." Officer Torres urged her forward, but she resisted for one more moment. "Tell Jason, I would have made it painless in the end," she added, her eyes, "never leaving mine. That was the plan. He would have just gone to sleep one night and never woken up. It would have been a kindness, really." Then she was gone, led away down the corridor, leaving me standing there, with her chilling words echoing in my mind. I made my way back to Jason's room, dreading the conversation to come. How do you tell your child that the person they chose to love had been systematically trying to kill them? I found Jason sitting upright in his hospital bed, Detective Morales beside him. His face was ashen, eyes red-rimmed. On the bedside table lay photographs of the evidence found at his home, the hidden chemicals, the notebook in Amanda's handwriting, detailing poison dosages, and his symptoms, the financial documents outlining what would happen after his present death. The evidence was undeniable even to someone desperate to disbelieve. "Mom," he said when I entered, his voice breaking on the single syllable. "She really did this. She was really trying to." He couldn't finish the sentence. I moved to his side, taking his hand in mine. "I'm so sorry, Jason." He broke, then collapsing into sobs that shook his weakened frame. I held my 35-year-old son as he wept just as I had when he was a small boy with a scraped knee or a broken toy. But this wound went deeper than any childhood injury. This was a betrayal so profound it shook the very foundation of his world. Detective Morales quietly excused herself, promising to return later for additional statements. In the privacy that followed, Jason began the painful process of looking back through his marriage with new, unblinded eyes. "She always insisted on preparing all the meals," he said hoarsely. "Said it was because she loved taking care of me, but she would get so angry if I ate lunch out with colleagues or if we went to a restaurant she hadn't chosen." I listened as he recalled other warning signs, how she had gradually isolated him from friends, discouraged him from visiting me. Too often insisted on managing their finances, despite his aptitude with numbers, expressed disappointment when he relayed age, turned down a pharmaceutical industry job to continue teaching, researched his family history of illnesses with unusual thoroughness. I just thought she was being thorough, loving, organized, he whispered. How could I have been so blind? Love makes us trust, I told him gently, and trust makes us vulnerable. This isn't your fault, Jason. But he wasn't ready to absolve himself. I brought her into our lives. I defended her when you expressed concerns. I gave her access to everything, including my life. As the reality of his narrow escape continued to sink in, Jason grew quiet, staring at the hospital ceiling. Finally, he turned to me with eyes full of confusion and pain. Why didn't she just leave? He asked. If she was so unhappy with me with our life, why not just divorce me? I had been asking myself the same question. The detective suggested financial motive, I said carefully, but I think it's more than that. From what the police found, Amanda spent months planning this. The calculated nature of it, the detailed records she kept the research shed, done it points to someone who enjoyed the process, the power it gave her. Divorce wouldn't have satisfied whatever drives someone to do something like this. Jason closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. I thought she loved me, he whispered. All I could do was hold his hand tighter and promise him he wasn't alone. The road to recovery, both physical and emotional, would be long, but he would not walk it without support. The hospital kept Jason for a full week, administering chelation therapy to remove the heavy metals from his system and providing supportive care for his damaged organs. I rarely left his side, sleeping in the uncomfortable recliner chair beside his bed and advocating fiercely with medical staff to ensure he received the best possible treatment. Dr. Patel became our ally in navigating Jason's recovery. He explained the physiological effects of the poisoning in terms we both could understand given our science backgrounds. The arsenic and thallium have caused damage to your peripheral nerves, which explains the tingling and weakness you've been experiencing, he told Jason, during morning rounds 3 days into the hospital stay. The good news is that with the poisons removed from your system and proper nutrition, you'll likely regain full function over time. The liver and kidney damage is concerning, but not irreversible at this stage. If Wed caught this a few months later, Dr. Patel let the implication hang in the air. Am I going to have permanent effects? Jason asked, his voice stronger than it had been on admission but still lacking its usual vigor. You may experience some residual neuropathy, Dr. Patel acknowledged, and you'll need to be monitored regularly for potential long-term organ issues. But you're young. You were healthy before this began, and the poisoning, while sustained, was administered in small enough doses that complete recovery is a realistic outcome. I watched relief wash over my son's face. Despite everything, he still had a future. The realization seemed to strengthen his resolve to heal. When Jason was finally discharged, the question of where he would go loomed large. He couldn't return to the house he had shared with Amanda. Not only was it still partially cordoned off as a crime scene, but the psychological impact of returning to the place where had been systematically poisoned was too much to contemplate. You're coming home with me, I stated firmly, as we gathered the few personal items that had accumulated in his hospital room. It's not a suggestion. For once, Jason didn't assert his independence. The relief on his face told me he hadn't wanted to ask but desperately needed the safety of his childhood home. My condominium had a small guest room that I quickly prepared for his extended stay. I purchased new bedding, cleared out old boxes that had been stored there, and made sure the space felt as welcoming as possible. It wasn't large, but it would be a safe haven while he recovered and determined his next steps. The first night home, we sat at my kitchen table over bowls of homemade chicken soup. Jason had been quiet during the ride from the hospital, lost in thought as he gazed out the passenger window. Now, stirring his soup absently, he finally spoke. I should have seen it coming, he said softly. There were so many warning signs. I reached across the table to cover his hand with mine. Jason, even trained psychologists, miss signs of dangerous behavior in their partners. Amanda was extremely skilled at deception. He nodded slightly, acknowledging my point without fully accepting it. I keep thinking about all those meals she insisted on preparing, claiming they would help me feel better. The special teas when I was nauseated. The way she would watch me eat, saying she was just making sure I was getting enough nutrition. He shuddered. She was watching to make sure I consumed the poison. The following weeks established a new routine. Jason slept long hours as his body recovered, often not rising until mid-morning. I prepared simple, nutritious meals that would help his damaged organs heal. Dr. 2. Patel had provided specific dietary guidelines to follow. 3 times a week we drove to follow up medical appointments and therapy sessions. The psychological healing proved more challenging than the physical. Jason had agreed to see Dr. Winters, a therapist specializing in trauma and betrayal recommended by the hospital. Initially resistant to discussing his feelings, he gradually began to open up about the profound impact of Amanda's betrayal. "I don't know how to trust my own judgment anymore," he confessed one evening after returning from a particularly difficult session. "I thought I knew her. I thought what we had was real. How can I ever trust anyone again?" I wished I had an easy answer, but the truth was that his trust had been violated in the most fundamental way possible. All I could offer was my presence and the reminder that not everyone was like Amanda. Legal proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. The evidence against Amanda was overwhelming: the poisonous substances found in their home, her detailed journal of dosages and symptoms, the financial documents outlining her plans for after Jason's death, and now the definitive hospital tests linking those same poisons to Jason's condition. Amanda's parents arrived from Grosse Pointe like a force of nature, hiring the best criminal defense attorney in the state, and attempting to frame their daughter's actions as the result of mental illness rather than calculated malice. They tried repeatedly to contact Jason, leaving messages expressing disbelief that their daughter could have done what she was accused of, suggesting there must be some explanation. Jason deleted the messages without responding. 2 weeks after Jason's discharge, Detective Morales requested we meet her at the police station. She had updates on the case she'd wanted to deliver in person. We sat in a small conference room as she spread photographs on the table between us. "We've been investigating Amanda's background more thoroughly," she explained, "and we've found some concerning patterns." She showed us images of documents and what appeared to be academic records. Amanda was dismissed from her undergraduate program at her first university following accusations of tampering with a roommate's medications. The matter was handled internally, with Amanda transferring to the school, where she eventually met Jason. Jason stared at the documents, his hands trembling slightly. "She never mentioned attending another university. She told me she'd been at Michigan her entire college career." Detective Morales nodded grimly. "We've also identified 2 previous boyfriends who experienced mysterious health issues while dating Amanda. Neither case progressed to the severity of your situation, Mr. Harmon, and no one connected the incidents at the time, but in retrospect the patterns are strikingly similar." She placed another document on the table, a psychiatric evaluation. During her initial processing, Amanda underwent standard psychological assessment. The results indicate traits consistent with antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. In layman's terms, she demonstrates a profound lack of empathy, an inflated sense of her own importance, and no remorse for her actions. Jason pushed the evaluation away, unable to continue reading. "How could I not have seen this?" he whispered. "People with these traits are often exceptionally good at hiding their true nature," Detective Morales assured him. "They can be charming, attentive, and appear perfectly normal, even loving when it serves their purposes. You aren't the first person to be deceived, and sadly, you won't be the last." As we left the police station, Jason was quieter than usual, processing this new information about the woman he had married. Back at my condominium, he retreated to the guest room for several hours. When he finally emerged, his eyes were red, but his expression was more resolved than I'd seen since the ordeal began. "I need to move forward," he stated simply. "I can't let her take any more of my life than she already has." It was the first sign of the resilience I'd always known my son possessed, beginning to reassert itself through the layers of trauma and betrayal. The process of untangling his life from Amanda's proved complex. Their house remained in limbo, impossible to sell, while the legal case was ongoing and emotionally impossible for Jason to return to. With my help, he arranged for trusted friends to pack his essential belongings and personal items, leaving furniture and household goods behind. His colleagues at Franklin High School rallied around him with surprising strength, organizing meal deliveries, offering assistance with lesson planning for his eventual return, and respecting his privacy while making it clear they stood with privacy 12th him. Several of his students even sent cards with well wishes, though details of his condition had been kept confidential with the school, simply announcing he was on medical leave. As May turned to June and the school year came to a close, Jason began spending more time outdoors, first just sitting on my small balcony, then taking short walks around the neighborhood. His physical strength returned gradually, his body healing from the damage Amanda had inflicted. The haunted look in his eyes remained, but occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of his old smile, brief moments when the weight of betrayal lifted enough for him to remember joy was still possible. One evening, as we prepared dinner together, a task Head taken increasing interest in as his health improved, Jason suddenly set down the knife he was using to chop vegetables and looked at me intently. "Thank you, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "If you hadn't noticed something was wrong, if your friend hadn't recognized the signs in that lunch," he swallowed hard, "it'd be dead by now. She would have succeeded." I put down my own cooking utensils and embraced my son, feeling the healthy solidity returning to his once dangerously thin frame. "We don't need to think about what might have happened," I told him firmly. "You're here. You're healing. That's what matters." He nodded against my shoulder before pulling back a new determination in his eyes. "I think I need to be at the preliminary hearing next week. I need to see this through." I studied his face, looking for signs that he wasn't ready for such a confrontation, but found only resolve. "If you're sure that's what you need, I'll be right beside you." The preliminary hearing was set for the following Tuesday, a procedural step that would determine whether the case would proceed to trial, though given the overwhelming evidence there was little doubt of the outcome. Jason would face his would-be murderer across a courtroom for the first time since her arrest, a prospect that filled me with both dread and a sense that it was a necessary part of his healing. 6 months after that fateful day when Margaret recognized the signs of poisoning in Jason's lunch, we stood together in the driveway of his new home. It was a modest craftsman-style house, near a small lake about 40 minutes from his school, and in a completely different neighborhood from where Head lived with Amanda. The fall colors painted the surrounding trees in vibrant oranges and reds, a stark contrast to the sterile hospital room where Head begun his recovery. "What do you think?" he asked, watching my face as I took in the charming details of the covered porch and multi-paned windows. "It's perfect, Jason," I replied honestly. "It's completely you." And it was. Where the house Head shared with Amanda had been sleek, modern, and somewhat impersonal, this home radiated warmth and character. Inside, Head arranged his books, scientific models, and personal treasures in ways that reflected his passions and personality. There was no trace of Amanda's influence, no lingering shadow of her presence. The physical transformation in Jason himself was equally remarkable. Head regained his healthy weight, his skin had lost the sallow pallor of poisoning, and his movements were once again strong and sure. The doctors had been amazed by his complete physical recovery, attributing it to his relatively young age, excellent prior health, and the prompt medical intervention. The emotional healing had been more gradual but no less significant. After 3 months of living in my guest room, Jason had made the decision to look for his own place, a step toward independence that signaled his growing confidence. Head returned to teaching that fall semester, welcomed back by colleagues and students who knew only that Head been seriously ill but was now recovered. Our relationship had deepened through the ordeal. Where once Wed maintained the slightly distant rapport typical of adult children and their parents, Wed now developed a closer bond forged through crisis and recovery. We spoke more openly, shared thoughts more freely, and appreciated each other with greater awareness of life's fragility. "Come help me unpack the kitchen boxes," Jason suggested, leading the way inside. "Margaret is coming over later to see the place, and I'd like to have at least one room fully functional. Margaret had become an unexpected but treasured addition to our small family circle. Her quick thinking and pharmaceutical knowledge had quite literally saved Jason's life, a debt neither of us could ever fully repay. Though initially just my coworker, she'd become a dear friend to both of us, often joining us for dinner or accompanying us on outings, as Jason gradually reclaimed his social life. As we unpacked dishes and arranged them in cabinets, Jason spoke of his plans for the coming school year. "I've been developing a new chemistry curriculum focused on forensic applications," he explained, his eyes lighting up with the passion for teaching that had always defined him. "The students are fascinated by real-world applications of chemical analysis. Some of them have even talked about pursuing careers in forensic science." I smiled, recognizing that Head found a way to transform his traumatic experience into something positive for his students. It was so characteristic of Jason to find educational value even in the darkest circumstances. The Amanda chapter of our lives had reached its legal conclusion 3 months earlier. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a lengthy trial that would expose even more details of her calculated cruelty, she'd accepted a plea agreement. The 20-year sentence for attempted murder ensured she'd be well into middle age before release, with stringent parole conditions to follow. The court had also ordered psychiatric treatment during her incarceration, though the professionals involved had little hope of meaningful change given her personality disorders. Jason had attended every court appearance, sitting straight-backed beside me as the legal process unfolded. Had chosen not to make a victim impact statement, telling me privately that he refused to give Amanda the satisfaction of seeing his pain one last time. Instead, Head watched in silence as she was led away to begin her sentence, his only visible reaction a deep exhale, as though releasing the last of her poison from his system. After we finished unpacking the kitchen, we moved to the living room, where Jason had set up his collection of science books and teaching materials. As we arranged them on shelves, he paused, holding a framed photograph of himself with a group of colleagues at a science education conference. "You know what the strangest part of all this has been," he said thoughtfully, learning to trust my instincts again. "There were moments with Amanda when something felt off, but I talked myself out of those feelings because they didn't match what I wanted to believe. I won't make that mistake again." Trusting our instincts is one of the hardest lessons to learn, I agreed. We're taught to be logical, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to question our negative reactions. But sometimes those instincts are our subconscious mind picking up on signals our conscious mind wants to ignore. Jason nodded, placing the photograph on the shelf. "I've learned to pay attention to that feeling in my gut now, whether it's about people or situations. It's not about being suspicious of everyone. It's about honoring that internal warning system we all have." His healing journey had included not only therapy sessions, but also a renewed interest in understanding human psychology, particularly the dynamics of manipulation and control. Head read extensively about personality disorders and the patterns of abusive relationships, finding clarity and validation in understanding the mechanics of what Head experienced. As promised, Margaret arrived later that afternoon bearing a houseplant as a housewarming gift and her characteristic no-nonsense affection. We gave her the grand tour, celebrating each personalized touch Jason had added to make the house truly his own. Over dinner at Jason's new dining table, Margaret raised her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she said simply, "and to trusting ourselves." We clinked glasses, the moment significant in its ordinariness, 3 friends sharing a meal, looking forward rather than back. The shadow of Amanda would never completely disappear. Jason would always carry the scars of her betrayal, but it had receded enough to allow light and joy back into his life. Later, after Margaret had left, and Jason and I sat on his new porch watching the sunset over the lake, he turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "If there's one thing I want people to learn from what happened to me," he said, "it's that love shouldn't hurt. It shouldn't diminish you or make you doubt yourself." I ignored so many red flags with Amanda because I confused control with caring and isolation with intimacy. "You were seeing what you wanted to see," I replied gently. "We all do that sometimes." He nodded. "But I've learned that real love expands your world, it doesn't shrink it. Real love gives you roots and wings, not chains. I don't know if he'll ever trust enough to try again, but at least I know now what to look for and what to avoid. The healing power in his words struck me deeply. My son had walked through fire and emerged not just surviving but with wisdom that might someday help others recognize the difference between love and its dangerous counterfeits. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, I felt a profound gratitude wash over me. For the medical knowledge that had helped me recognize something was wrong. For Margaret's expertise that identified the poison. For the swift action of medical professionals and law enforcement. But mostly for the resilience of the human spirit that allowed my son to reclaim his life from the woman who had tried to take it. Life offers no guarantees of safety, no promises that those we trust will prove worthy of that trust, but it does offer second chances, opportunities to rebuild and grow stronger at the broken places. Jason had embraced that chance with courage and determination, refusing to let Amanda's betrayal define his future. And in that perhaps lay the most important lesson of all, that even in our most vulnerable moments, when trust is shattered and certainty crumbles, we can find the strength to begin again, wiser for our wounds and more compassionate for our pain. Have you ever had an instinct about someone that others dismissed? Trust those feelings, they might save your life, or someone else's. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more true stories that could help protect you and your loved ones. Share this video with someone who needs to trust their gut more. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, always pay attention to those warning signs life sends your way.